All right, we're live.
Oh, we are. We're live.
Yeah.
Hey,
How's it going, Dad?
good man. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
That's
Um,
good.
we tonight we're just it's the night before the election. You got any butterflies or anything like that for it?
I wrote, "'Twas the night before the election, and all through the house, the progressives and the conservatives were raging." And
You're making it up on the spot, aren't you?
yeah, and I said, and I came in with the answer and hope, and they all swooned. And
You
I
know
said,
what?
hope no don't mope. So uh,
You
yeah,
know what
and
I
I did.
always thought was overrated about poems is that they had to rhyme. I love that. Yours are just it's very postmodern poetry that you got. The,
It's across, like we said before, haiku, Dr. Zeus, Robert Frost.
yeah.
So actually this one got pretty good. I did a commercial, so it's going to be going out.
Oh,
PASA.
nice.
Yeah. So it's about after the election and just how to respond with hope. And so I think that's a real good topic for tonight. Just kind of, what's good. I think talk about some of the things we agree on, and just, it's awesome some of the things you were saying earlier. So I think it gives people a real ramp for their discussions with one another. Because I'm pretty sure your vote has changed since we've been talking. So I just think that that you're accepted in your community because so it's one, just if you want to be in the will.
Oh, wow.
Hey, I want to hold this up for everybody. Hope it's not hereditary. Jed wrote this, and
Yeah.
I always go find my head here, but it is an awesome book. So it's on our webpage and Amazon, and we're going to be getting in a stash of books so that we really have these,
Oh,
and
we
it's
got to do
just
that.
full of humor. And I'm going to get that address. I got to get that email from you and
Yeah.
contact.
I'll send it to you. I'll send.
Okay, so I can get right on that. So that is an awesome book that just gives our journey together, father and son, and just gives a lot of the hope stories, but also the deep understanding of me. I thought
Ha-
I
Have you ever
understood
read?
you.
Have you ever read any of the reviews for the book?
No, where is it?
It's just on their
Amazon.
Amazon, and then I think on Goodreads, just like different places. There's books. I haven't looked at them in a long time, but it's fun to read them sometimes because they're
Wow.
mostly really good. There was one lady who she was like, I normally don't read nonfiction. This looked really funny. I picked it up. I thought it was really funny. And then she was like, but like as like a warning, she was like, but it gets really emotional, and I found myself crying a couple of times. And with that being said, I still thought it was a good book. Like she was like, it made me cry, but I still liked it, and I thought it was just funny because it was like she was like, I did not expect to feel things reading this book, and
That's
so
awesome.
that feels
Because
like
yeah,
it's
that's
like
how. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say it because I remember when we were going through those stories. A lot of the little Willie story or the Thanksgiving story. I mean, some of those um, are very heartfelt, but also very. Um, I mean,
Can be weighty.
yeah, and it can get you in the feels.
Yeah. And you know what I found, just as I would read the stories and tell the stories, is that people identified with them. They might not have the similar experience.
Right.
They say you're crazy, but they identified with the principle in life. It was
Yeah.
pretty pretty universal. So I
Well,
found
and
that.
we don't have to keep talking about the book, but just one thought that I was having recently too is what was made it, you know, an easier book to write. Because I mean that was early in my writing career. You know, I feel like, you know, I've gained a lot of capabilities as a writer since then. But I I remember it just being a lot. It was pretty easy for me to like put out like list of all the chapters and all the stories that we'd do, because it was based off of, or I mean, it was your life, it was your stories, but it was based off of 10 years, 15, 20 years of me traveling around with you, hearing your stories, seeing which ones resonated with people, and like seeing which ones resonated with me as well. So it was kind of like, it, you know, it took it took like a year to write it, and not even, I think it took like 9 months to write it. But it was really a, 15 years in the making sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, just but you give hours a day, so just to see you go from one place to where you landed it, just it was pithy and it got deep. Where I mean, it just in a few words, you just identify the core of me, or the core of the story of us together, and just how you wove in all the history. And it wasn't exactly chronological, but it felt like it just had this perfect flow to it, and like the puzzle pieces of my life, but for others that they could see for their lives, these similar experiences and the values that came out. Like I'm looking at a main story for the team.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Uh, so that's one thing we're gonna do is just pull these out and just put a cover on them, update them a little, and put them out as the Yellow House stories for the different rooms. Because we'll be having, they asked me to do in the city, Kansas City, a kind of a PSA where they had me do, I used to do those Hope Hero events.
Yeah.
And so
Hope Hero or Hope Hearing?
Hope
Oh,
Hero.
oh, right. That was like what Blake and Amy Ann ran for
Yeah.
a long time. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. With John Storr.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And we would get people that were from all walks of life, and that was really, so you had Democrat, Republican, you had mayors, and you had
Yeah.
different ones, and just to get them into a room, you had news reporters. We'd say they were heroes to our city in a certain way. They
Yeah.
all had a cause that they're, and so the athletes, and then to see them just the way they'd enjoy one another in those settings.
Yeah.
But without those settings, they don't have much history with each other, so it's kind of just you don't understand each other. So that was one of the most successful, I mean, in my heart, things that we did. So to bring people together in our community. So I was just looking through it, and a number of people have written and still remember it, not necessarily for getting an award, but for the camaraderie that happened afterwards.
Yeah.
So I think we can make a lot of progress with the election and stuff. And I think the book is one example of just, I had it somewhere, but the book that, it's language that builds a bridge over, us being different, you understanding me and me understanding you. And I just think that's where we're at now. Because when I was talking about us talking about freedoms,
Yeah.
it's more to me. I guess I'm thinking about, and you said maybe virtues, but just what you see for a city or society
Yeah.
that you're hopeful in this election
Yeah.
that these matters
Hmm.
are valued, and
Yeah.
that and I love what you said earlier that that it just doesn't take a vote that you can
Yeah.
continue on to help build those redeeming qualities into a city or a nation. So
Yeah. Well, that's
that's
what.
what
Yeah. Sorry. You want me to jump in or?
I just would say that's where I think people that are listening from both sides tonight can agree and look at I mean we'll have some agreements, which is really I think valuable as we come out of the election. That I think we tended to see the last thing I'll say is political curtain pulled back, and I've lived many years, but just to have it pulled back to the place where you saw more uh, it felt like not as honorable ways, darkness, or just some. But it took me off, threw me off base. See it on each side, but then I realized it's a dot compared to the great God or great hearts of people. That I believe that there's going to be a breaking through to a conversation that we can really, you and I can have something to say about it by just communicating that way. I don't want to turn out like the British Parliament or the British tabloids where they just, when I go there, I'd be so surprised at what they were saying about one another. And then they were able to be friendly with one another, but it was just the means justified the end. And so but somebody's reputation might be ruined, and I just thought, man, there's got to be a better way to partner and move
Yeah.
forward. So,
Well, yeah. I mean, we were talking earlier about. I mean, this probably. I hope and I think that it probably will be one of the most largest turnouts for an election in a long time, and I think that there are some encouraging things about that. Like, despite I'm just trying to spin because there's like a lot of anxiety with this election, and obviously it's a far more contentious election than ones in the past, or at least from what I can remember. But I think that the fact that so many people are passionate about it means that like there's a lot of people who are invested in our nation and want, in some respects or another, to make the United States, see the United States be a better place, and to improve the United States and to fight for things that they care about and value. And on a political level, I feel like that can look really different a lot of times. On a personal level, though, I think that, so tomorrow, or for some of us who have already gotten out and voted, and if you can do that in your state.
hey, I figured out how to turn the sound down on this thing because it gives me who's commenting.
Oh, gotcha.
And so, how do you turn the volume down on this thing? I found it. I can't believe it. I did it. Okay. Awesome.
Look at that.
Okay.
See, change can happen.
Yeah, man.
There's hope.
I'm pretty happy with myself there.
Yeah, proud of you.
I'm gonna get this bite thing because it looks like I got jowls, but I don't.
No, you look good. You look good. You got a real sleek haircut there.
I told you why, didn't I?
No.
Can you see on top? It's not as bad as it was.
No. What'd you do?
Can you see in the back?
I mean, it doesn't look terrible, but I think I know where this is going. Did you took clippers to your own head?
Yeah, I mean, I'll send it to you, and it was just unbelievable. Because I got this thing they call Manscaped, and it's for an area. Well, I
Yeah,
wouldn't believe.
I don't think that's for.
I know it, but I didn't know what it was for. Somebody just told me it really works good,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
you can shave your head, and it really cuts fast.
sure,
And
okay.
I had a ton of hair, and so I mean, it just sucked me up. I mean, I tell you, Jed, it just was
Yeah.
three big yellow brown spots. So I've actually covered it. There's this brown powder. It's
Oh
really
yeah, yeah,
good. You can put it in there.
yeah.
Yeah. So if you saw it, it just was unbelievable. In the back, I could not believe when I saw it at the barber shop.
You can't just don't just go to get your hair cut, wear a mask, and get
I just
just.
kind of thought I could do it, man. I bought this thing, and I thought anytime, because it would just get real long and over my ears, and I
But
thought,
this isn't the first time you've done that.
yeah, I
That's
know it. I think you'd learn.
you got to learn. But that hey, you learned how to turn the volume down, so
Yeah, I can learn this too,
yeah.
So, so
Uh,
we're getting some neat comments, man. I just want to say thank you, Lynn. Thank you just everybody's commenting, and I just love Lee. I miss Lee a lot, and Doreen. I just asked some of these guys if they could help make comments. By that, comment to us, but share this with others because we'll have 40, 50,000. I didn't announce this one that well because I've been busy. Different ones. I said,
yeah.
how do we move forward from here? And Bill is kind of became a target because he
For
said,
well, he's
I
gotten
think,
a little outspoken with the political stuff, hasn't he? I mean, I don't want to.
yeah, I didn't know that, but I said, to him, I said, you don't want to be an unnecessary target. I said, Bill, and he just said that he could have a clear conscience to vote for. That's what's most important to him, clear conscience. He said to vote for Trump, and I don't know if he meant Biden as well, or if he. I don't. He wouldn't. The killer of the deal for believers, Christians, is abortion. That's gonna be that. That's the killer of the deal. That's where people just say,
Yeah,
you
that's
know, and I like state legislators. I think people understand in politics that there's some that never have any ability to speak into that issue. Really, I mean that's not their place. And so, 2016, I wasn't all Democrat, I wasn't all Republican, and I didn't
yeah.
vote on some because I think I was in the hospital, during part of that time, and
Mm,
so so that's where just there's just a lot to learn. I haven't voted if I don't know the judge and it's their
yeah,
career, and
yeah,
I'm going to vote them out just because I don't think they're good judges out there.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
wrong.
Don't, yeah,
Or if I vote on some of the, it's just as you got into politics, people will know, okay, a Republican wins in this territory, a Democrat wins in this territory. Sometimes they can, just to get in the door, do some things. So that's where I think it
yeah,
was interesting when I was with Newt Gingrich and Ron. You remember Ron Freeman when he ran for Senate?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I went around with him, and I just, that's where I began to know more of the political insiders that I could get, like Dick Morris. You remember Dick Morris?
I don't
Dick Morris did the Clinton campaigns, and he did like 30 senators. He was pretty,
ran campaign. He was a campaign manager or something.
yeah, just a counselor. He's chief
Yeah,
advisor to the Clintons. So that he won them all. and he won, for Clinton, and then they had a disagreement about something, and it got pretty volatile.
Oh
And then
no.
he got in trouble for something. And so now he's kind of helping Johnny Enlow with religious freedoms in Central
Oh,
American
interesting.
nations. But he's got a wife that's amazing. It seems like so. But it's difficult to know how to listen. I'm gonna ask Mike Bickle because when I went through the divorce and people kind of made assumptions, it was really painful. Because I did things wrong. I needed to learn and grow, but I didn't do what people thought I did. And and I thought, how did they decide that, or they didn't even talk to me, or they heard and I just love what Mike Bickle said. He said, "I've known you, and you're the real deal. And so, if I don't hear it from your mouth, then I'm going to talk to you about it." So I just think that there's a better way forward. That's an area that I think we've learned a lot about. What I would say is, if I've learned anything, about this season and how unhinged people can become,
Yeah.
that there's not a maintaining composure
Yeah.
and believing the best in human beings and giving them the benefit of the doubt. And I understand people are in real pain.
Yeah.
But if you're in real pain because you're a white person or a black person's giving you a grief, or you're a policeman, you feel like black people have been giving you grief for a while. Well, you can't identify the whole black community that way, but it takes some healing of that person, or you fire on friend and foe. And that's where, a humility and a composure and,
Yeah.
and a listening is really important. But
Yeah.
we're going to talk about some of the things that you want to see just from this election, or
Well, so I think, I think that, so you brought up like the abortion being just obviously a very big topic. I mean, a lot of people vote just purely on the issue of abortion, and I think when it comes to politics, that conversation is obviously, very difficult and can be contentious, and I think we're, not wanting to get into that or anything like that. But what's exciting a little bit for me, or I don't know if exciting is the right word, but what I'm trying to maintain and encourage as far as like, hopeful for after the election is that regardless, like say, abortion is a very big issue for you, and even for people who are liberal and are pro-choice. For myself, that there's a lot of issues where it's like it's still something that I care about. And so like post-election, once it's after the vote, so I'm going to vote according to what I think is right and what I think is best for the nation and the policies that I want to see. But then when it then comes to the afterwards, like our vote isn't the only thing that we can do. Like we have a desire to have our nation become a better place and to continue fighting for our nation to grow and progress and to hold on to those values that we see as important. So like there's things in which it could become on, like whether it's, I knew a lot of people in the conservative world that I used to be, was my world for a lot of people who advocated for abortion or sorry, not abortion, adoption, and because they saw that this was something that was important to them, and so to make to help the foster care community and help like kids who don't have parents, and then on my end now, like working for healthcare and having people have access to means of healthcare can like diminish number of abortions and stuff like that. And so the point is well, you got a funny smile there.
Well, I'm just looking at people's comments. They're really good, man. I'm listening to you. I can do two things, but they're just yeah. I just give you a little play-by-play. They're just
well. Here, can I finish the thought? Otherwise, I'll lose it.
Okay, good. And I want to give them an opportunity to ask us questions.
For sure. No, I'm just saying, like, regardless, or like, you know, I think that homelessness is like a big problem, but like I can vote for that, and I will vote for that, and I think it's really important to vote according to like these values. And it's not just, you know, it's not just the president election. You know, there's a lot of other things on the ballot. There's policies on the ballot. You know, it's really important to know what's going to be on there and to vote. And I think that we really make an impact and effect through that way. But I also think that we just make an impact and effect by like volunteering and giving our time and donations and energy and support just in any way that we can, because it's quite clear from this election that people really do care about the state of our nation. So I think that a good next step and just good place for people to be in is like, regardless of who you know wins the election tomorrow, I still have an opportunity to fight for the things that I want to fight for. And everybody does. And a lot of those things can often be the same. You know, we can fight for access to healthcare, you know, and there's different means of fighting for that. And even if you think that, you know, you want to vote this way and I want to vote that way, like we can still both fight for those things that we care about. And we don't actually have to fight each other on those things all the time. And so I think that's really encouraging. And I want to look for sort of that hopeful perspective where we can say we can do good, we can make change. And instead of making it just about our vote, which feels intense, and if the person that you vote for doesn't win, it can feel incredibly defeating and discouraging. But, you know, I just want to remind people that whoever wins, that you can still like fight for the world that you want to see. And I think that that's, you know, an important thing.
Yeah, I think that, you know, that's excellent. And I do think that, you know, that laws are interesting. You know, I've watched enough and looked enough at voting records to see that they're not always the way you think they'll be. You know, sometimes it's be lines, and it seems to have been more that way lately. But, you know, I think that there can be real, you know, the freedom to have, I believe, civil discussions.
Yeah.
That are noble and respectful.
Yeah.
And not just aim to get a soundbite in about it. Works in the short term when you demonize somebody, because you know, it's like we had somebody they wanted their money back the first thing they come into B&B, and we're number 1, 2, and 3 in the city. And since we wouldn't give them their money back, and we're mom and pop doing a lot. They put bed bugs, and that you know, Caitlin was the rudest, and Caitlin's the most least rude, you know. And she,
right.
And but that is almost slander, and it gives us 1 star, and so it'll take us from superhost, and it affects our livelihood.
Yeah.
And so I do believe that there's just a responsibility before we communicate in the media or social media where it's not an automaton on the other side. It's a real human being. And I think that what I've learned about this is that, you know, that this is one of the greatest tools in the world, social media, where gosh, you can talk to family You could never do that. You remember on the range where you wouldn't see your relatives for, and it just, to me, it could be such a tool of good,
Yeah.
but it's coming into agreement of, these things we discourage. We can't necessarily control free speech, but if it's blatantly violent or aimed at get a kid to commit suicide because it just
Yeah.
does
Yeah.
a terrible thing,
Yeah.
that we all ought to be in agreement about that and have some common sense.
Yeah.
You know, the common sense on the First Amendment that there's a freedom to worship, and they were fair with that. And my heart would be dead if I couldn't love God and just care about His heart and what He cares about. I just got a living relationship. I just love to, kind of going from Bob the Revelator to like the Apostle John to Bob the friend, and I spend more of my time just being a friend. But if somebody said, like in Egypt, they don't allow certain things, but uh, but
Yeah.
then the freedom to speech. But I
Yeah.
do believe we want to teach a society to speak in a way that builds up. We all want to be built up, and we don't force it. But like you were saying, virtues
Yeah.
and those virtues, like the virtue to care for our creation, what the business world, it, like a Bob Fraser will say, okay, well, fracking, there's been no proof, and this and that and that.
Yeah.
And what Joe Biden just said was, we're going to try and get rid of it. We're going to try and head towards a, fossil fuel, because we all agree that carbon emissions and those things, and it's, well, Pennsylvanians will lose jobs and those kind of things, but
Yeah.
we've got to advance as a society, and if we want it to be clean,
Yeah.
there'll be other jobs that'll be provided.
Yeah.
But we do need to not say for Joe Biden, I believe tomorrow it'll be done. Because,
Yeah. Sure.
and we not say with the Trump, did we just avoid it and say
Right.
fossil fuels are here forever?
Right.
Because
Well, yeah, and that's. I mean, I don't want to cut you off, but I think that you're making an excellent point, and I mean, it's part of the issue, and I think that this represents a lot of why I'm kind of excited that the election is just tomorrow, and we can stop. But I get distracted by your smiling at the comments, but it's good. I'm glad you're liking them.
Wayne is saying, shave it off, Bob. Danny Falls. Or Wayne says, we need both your voices, need to see the intrinsic value on each side, which is really good. And then Jacqueline's got a lot of thumbs up just about, voting. And then Wayne's talking about me, old dogs, it's learning new tricks. And then you got somebody who's pretty adamant about abortion, saying call it butcher, and that.
Yeah.
And then
I think that we should have that conversation sometime, because I'll just say this. I know that the first time I had that conversation because it was just always automatic for me, because I grew up, and the first time I actually had that conversation, it went way differently than I thought it would. And so I think that's a hard one to have, because I think that people have deep convictions, and I think that those deep convictions are almost always based in good intentions, and this is going to be hard for people on the right to see with the people on the left, and that's why that issue is really, really difficult, is because it's about protecting people for both. It's about protecting people. It's just it's really, it's just a very difficult conversation and whatnot. And so I totally understand that there's going to be people who are very appalled by the stance that I have on that. But anyway, but going back,
I have heard people. I mean, your sister talked about, well, she named other kinds of murders that are happening in our society through governmental influence. She said, why is this more wrong? And
if you're going to be pro-life, like, let's advocate for, healthcare and stuff like that. And I agree. I think that it also is just taking it away. I mean, I think it's just a hard conversation. Like, I want to flip it to, just because I think that the abortion one could be really explosive if we don't. So I think a better example, or just a easier example, is the one you were talking about fracking and about oil and coal, and so we have, in one sense, we're wanting to move to a world where we're less reliant on fossil fuels, where we're creating less carbon emissions, but at the same time we have economies that are propped up by these industries, and if you immediately go from A to Z, it'll really destroy these local economies. And you also have people who haven't been educated in other things. You go to school or in the 80s or 70s or whatever for engineering in a certain sense, and it's changed so much. And so what is how everything in and out about your oil refinery or your coal, whatever it is. And so to have this idea that you would suddenly be out of a job while you're 10, 15 years away from retirement or something like that is a terrifying prospect. And so that's why it gets into this really difficult conversation, because it's like, on one hand, if we just transition out, all of these people are left, and are, don't have job security, don't have like identity of like jobs also play a critical identity role of like how I contribute to the world. And if I don't have that, like say I'm an educator and I suddenly can't teach anymore. It's like, well, what am I supposed to do? But then on the other hand, there's a lot of things where it's like, well, we need to start for many reasons, like the environmental degradation and global climate change and sustainability and all of these reasons where it's like, well, we can't keep investing in this one field, or otherwise we're going to have consequences that, are astronomical. And so it's a hard conversation to have. And that's what's so frustrating about the current political system, is that we have, you flip on the TV every time I'm watching, a Chiefs game or a Broncos game, I guess, because I'm here. I see all these political ads that make really complicated and really nuanced issues into hot, and even the debates, like,
no, that's right.
It becomes he's wanting to take your jobs, and then he's wanting to destroy their planet. And there is truth to both of those things, or like he's wanting to get rid of your jobs, or, and there's truth to both of those things. There are dangers and it is hard, but it feels like, I don't know. And so that's why I'm excited, because if people are passionate about those things, like if you're passionate about jobs and people finding jobs in Pennsylvania, like the Pennsylvania community, and you're like, well, now after the election, you can cast your vote, right? But then you can be like, okay, well, what can we do? Well, let's start investing in like adult education programs in Pennsylvania. So that people can, like, the engineer in Pennsylvania can learn a job which is scary and hard, but like can learn to like use his skills or her skills in a different field or something like that. And then I can advocate for like, okay, well, like whether the fossil fuel industry stays or goes, like I can advocate for educating people to know how to, responsibly live their lives and lower carbon emission, whether it's, through eating less meat or like a bunch of different activities that can be done to do that and become less reliant on these particular things. And so it's like we can both, once we're away from politics, we can fight for those goods and we're not fighting each other, like it's a mutually beneficial thing where like, let's do it. Let's, work towards the greater good together. And so, so that's, I
think it comes down to a shift, just looking at the election and, the people that are writing and what's going to be important for them moving forward, that, the ability to keep on a conversation and where the conversation shifts. And I have seen it. I just know people close to, the president, and I believe that there is a measure of a shift after COVID where, he works 20 hours a day. The guy, he just is up and at it. So the ability to stop, like during the winter, the sap's in the root for a reason. It's time to reevaluate who you are and how you're going about things versus production mode, and so I see what I've heard is that when there's good points made, that there's a good response. So my point with that is, and I pray for that on all sides, that there can be just a humility to say, okay, like with the environment, I'm convinced that there's renewable energies that are clean, that are worth investigating, and that we'll love it. I just love the idea of the coal factories being gone in China. Beijing, I was involved with Mitch when we had to redo the environment. So when they came in for the Olympics, it looked like it was beautiful gardens everywhere. Well, like $33 billion they had to spend but it wasn't, it was cosmetic and just to see that beautiful land. And I think that we're heading to some real discoveries.
Yeah.
And that's where I want to see after the election. Well, this just makes sense for all of us, because the earth, like I've been in enough countries like Zimbabwe where the little bit of grass and it was just every tree cut down the grass. And, I'm doing more time looking into policies where they're replanting trees and, different things that will take a while to develop and some good starts. But, just when we're at a place where we were getting caught up on the details and arguing about climate change and those things versus saying, taking a step back in common sense and just saying, if you're blowing tons of water through the earth,
right,
there's going to be a potential destabilizing. Now, there's not enough research to that. We're in a difficult transition time because there's not enough research and development to go to, the solar, the wind.
Wind, yeah. We're gonna need, and like there's things with wind energy. They have effects on environment. Not all environmental impacts are global warming. That's something that I think people don't think about as much as they should. So that's why I like talking about environmental degradation instead of talking about global climate change. Global climate, I don't want to lessen the importance of global climate change, but there's a lot of if you fracking is a good example where it's there's a couple of issues with it. It's not just that it's further use of oil and extracting oil, and so then further propping up fossil fuels. It's also that you shoot an incredible amount of water just like into the earth. So as far as like the use of water, because all that water is then mixed with a bunch of chemicals, and so that water becomes totally unpotable. I mean, but so what they do is they shoot it down, and you probably know this pretty well, but shoot it down and knock loose a lot of the sediment so that they can extract the oil. But then there will be, hundreds of thousands of gallons of water and chemicals that's pumped into the earth, and they'll normally just shoot it back down into that cavity and then seal it. But so what happens is that you just have all of this like contaminated water sitting there, and it won't become decontaminated. It won't for like 600,000 years, like something absolutely astronomical. And so you have a plot of land that suddenly is totally unusable. And like in the next 100 years, maybe it'll be fine. But then, 200 years from now, if we have a bunch of those and things shift, like the way in which those impact the earth and long-term consequences is really extreme. And also like it can seep into other water sources, and that's the big fear, and that's what's happened a couple of times. It shouldn't happen. Like people, and this is what a lot of people who advocate for fracking say, is that like, well, we can do it safely, and a lot of times that's true, but human beings cut corners all the time, and the consequences of cutting corners in this area are so drastic and so dire that that it can pollute a water system, and we don't really have good ways of like holding people accountable for that. And it's it's one of those like ask for forgiveness instead of permission sort of areas of life, in which we just it's like the oil spill, the BP oil spill, that like it happens and then you're just like, well, that happened, like there's no way to reverse it and stuff, and it can have astronomical effects on the environment. And so I do think that there's good, I get why people like want to advocate for it and stuff like that, but it's just people, we need to be able to talk about the risks and talk about and like you said, like you don't have to think too hard on it. You get that there's like shooting a bunch of chemicals into the earth and wasting that much water, it just inherently has a lot of like reason to be concerned and stuff. And if we don't have to do it, why would we do it? And so.
No, and I think, like people are commenting and they're saying, Wayne is continuing to comment and saying, he seems like he knows, but just the problem with clean energy.
Yeah.
If we're being forced into adopting and accepting it before it's mature and reliable enough, but also on fracking, the same thing. And so Davis Hill came on, says love to both of us. He's somebody you've met many times, but red hair, he's just great.
Yeah. I was thinking about Wayne's comment. I have a thought on it. If the
I want to move on from fracking in a second.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is just environmental ethics is my field, yeah, so of course I'll. But so what my one thought too is like I think that's a really fair. Like people don't want to be forced into having to adapt to new circumstances and new things because they know, is this reliable? Is this not? There is a sense in which like I think sometimes we look at Democrats or liberals forcing us into these things, and in reality it is just it's the circumstances of, it's like the same thing when people are like, I don't want to Democrats to force me to wear a mask. It's like, well, the consequences are there. Like, if you go out with, like, our COVID numbers are going up, you know, exponentially now, and so it's not really so much as like this is something that like a bunch of the liberals just want to enact on the others. It's that there's necessary demands that, like, if we want to maintain, you know, the earth in the way that it is, and like without like the, and we're already seeing a lot of like the forest fires that we've been seeing are really accelerated because of global climate change and stuff like that. And so that's where I think it's really important to be like, well, it's not the government forcing you to, or it's not the people forcing you to. It's that our circumstances are such that we have to adapt and develop to these particular things. Otherwise,
And I think you're opening up something that could be a good discussion. I think the opposition from reasonable people is, you know, you just look at the Spanish flu, or you look at the number of things,
sure,
like more people die from car wrecks than what's going to die. So do you stop drive cars?
sure.
And that's where closing down society is just incredibly, when there's not enough proof of the doctors. You know with your grandma that we had, my dad ended up doing research. The doctors weren't God, and they made so many misdiagnoses.
Oh,
And
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that there's a whole lot of concern about like, don't trust pharmaceutical companies and like the, you know, like I think that there's a whole lot of reasons to be concerned about stuff. And I think that, you know, I saw a image of the a ratio of like how much we should be concerned of COVID versus how much we are concerned with COVID. And like in March you know, it was like we were way concerned. Everybody was terrified. Everything was shutting down, and the threat level was here. And so it was disproportionate. And now it's flipped, where like now a lot of people are getting COVID, and the numbers are going up, but like now it's, so I think it's kind of the Goldilocks principle of like, I think it's really easy for people to get, you know, I totally agree. I think that there's reasons for people to worry about, you know, what's being said and when freedoms are being restricted. But then there's also times where it's like, well, how much does it really affect me to wear a mask, you know, or how much does it affect me to like do just the reasonable things of social distancing and stuff like that. I totally agree. I think that there's certain economic restrictions that probably had that were not beneficial or necessary, but we, at the same time, you look at the numbers that we have of COVID now, and it's like, man, if we had done better, there would be a lot of like, that's a, you know, 200,000 deaths or something like that. Like, we shouldn't diminish it by any means.
yeah, but you know, it's hard. Like Fauci came out in the beginning. He said if we do everything perfect,
Yeah,
we'll have
it's
about
still
250,000 deaths. So by the time it's over, and you know, so, but I agree with the mask and the social distancing. You know, I do believe life has risk, and that, you know, the herd mentality, or the herd reality, that there's things that are making it less, and the numbers show that it's being less fatal. And for youth in school, there's just not many deaths there. And I don't know if we want to get into, I think it's the night before the election, and I just
right.
think these are, to me, what we're looking for is, you know, forums that uh, have discussions where they're not it's like we had uh, dinners for six at our university, and we have six people, and we give them three questions, and they found out about each other. And I think the walls got broken down, and their understandings, even if they disagreed about something, unless it was really something that was good and evil to certain parties, it was amazing how much more unity there was and how much more, like us talking about agreements, about the value of a human being, agreements about society and how they care for, the elderly or the poor. And I don't believe that we have to rely just on old solutions. Like the government could be a real solution, but there's other options sometimes. That's where I look at what's happening and see, okay, what's my role with COVID to be able to help stop the spread of it? What's my role with tensions in cities, where there is, I've gone into when we were having tensions down here in Kansas City, and I just talked to Black people and said, what are you not getting, and how aren't you getting it? Just because, I just wanted to hear from them. And I found somebody that really had some good information. They're talking about they're 16% of population, but their economics are their 0.5% of the GDP or something like that. I mean, it was really, and I just, I said, well, where did you get your stats and how? And so that's a real pain to deal with. And then I heard, probably a month and a half later, Ice Cube came out with I used the exact same stat. And so that's real issues. And that's real issues. And so, when people say, well, it's just lack of fatherhood in the inner city families, it's part of it, but there's just, and I just think that we got wisdom. I believe, again, what we talked about earlier, we're going from the David, there's a shift happening that all should recognize. And it is where there's some progressive understandings that, by the definition of names, conservatives don't want to change, generally. And there's something awesome about, caring about your history and your values. But progressives want to change and not ruin things, but they want to look with conservatives and where we can grow and say, well, over the last 150 years, we really appreciate that we've grown this way. Because sometimes conservatives can feel like, man, I did all this to provide, like even the definition of a man. I was listening to Mulan and talked about a man's spirit, and I just felt empowered.
Like the Disney.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Well,
it
you do
wasn't
know that's about a woman being a man.
well, yeah, but
yeah,
it was, just in that culture, what they saw a man,
yeah,
and
yeah.
And it was, there's some movements that are macho. You go out and hunt and you do this and that.
Right.
But there was other things about being noble and respected and appreciated for your contribution. And, that's where I think there's topics that we're going to be able to step into and look at and say, there are certain characteristics of a man or a woman that are honorable and valuable and gives them their dignity and their beauty, but doesn't define them and limit them, but respects and appreciates what's at the core of them. I do believe that they're. So my point is that I think, what I'm looking at is from my standpoint, that I have the ability to write letters and people read them if I write a good letter, and I
Right.
get some help. Or I
Yeah.
have ability to speak a word of hope and people
Yeah.
listen to it. I have ability in our neighborhood to have, I talked about even tomorrow with neighbors praying for, those things that bless all those that are running and bless us for uh, honor and truth to come out and compassion. And, I just got a list. And actually, Francis Lowe tonight's, as a foreigner, a Supreme Court justice in Australia, he's going to write the freedoms of the miracle of America that he sees and just bless the nation, because I did it one time for his parliament during the Qantas crisis. I don't know if you remember that, but
Oh
I
yeah.
prayed for that. Huh?
Yeah. 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 I remember that.
Yeah. And so I see, and I look at us just seeing how, like my dad, he would look at, the dysfunctions in the school system, or
Yeah.
the inner city school system, and it's the suburban, it's everywhere, and find these hopeful solutions that got us from being under the clouds in this battle
Yeah.
zone, and where we could, and I think we could lift above the clouds. And I think that my hope is there's no rage, but okay, there's an election that the party that wins would really reach out and
Yeah.
say, we want to hear you, we want to listen.
I
And
totally agree. Yeah. I think that that's important. And I think that, like you said, I think learning, yeah, how to reach out is really important. And I think that for both of us and for people listening and whatnot, I think that looking at, your political convictions and saying, how can I, um, you know, fight for those things even after the elect. How can I make, enrich the world that I live in after the election? I think that the world would be in a better place if we all decided, that the things that we really cared about, poverty, homelessness, or even like number of unwanted pregnancies, or like a bunch of different things like that, if we advocated for change there and actually looked at our lives and said, how can I make a difference in these things by the things that I do, um, the world would be a lot better place, regardless of whoever gets elected tomorrow.
and I do believe that the goal of looking for agreement, and that we would be, and like you said, fighting for what you believe in, but also being open to new information that
Yeah, yeah, totally.
says that might not be the best
Yeah,
fight because I didn't have all the information, and I want to, and I think that there are good sources. I think one thing that's happened with the media outlets is that they did become kind of arms for the right or the left. And
sure.
I'm really looking at different sources
Yeah,
where I can trust. I can see interviews. One thing that's pretty cool is that the C-SPAN that goes all the time is you can see interviews with different senators or different people, and you can find out
yeah,
from the left and the right what do they, why do they believe what they believe,
yeah,
and you're not just demonizing one another. And so there has to be a different level of ownership and care. I see it in the church too, where we're just not going to get away with not listening to one another and respecting and making snap judgments. It's just the opposite of love when it's apathy. It's just not giving a darn to find out what's the real heart of the person. And and so it takes longer, but it's well worth it. Like there's a number of people I've shared about the Yellow House, and they're wanting to have front porch ministries where they
Mm,
just swing on the porch and they invite their neighbors
yeah.
and hear history and learn. And I think that there's real opportunity just in the way that we're talking, that where we can do some things together, like Ding Dong Blessing, and
Yeah.
we go places and we bless and meet people that you know would be what we would think is on the opposite end, and they might be, but we just end up having a conversation with them.
Yeah.
And
Reaching out to people who are different than us. I think that's a huge thing. Yeah.
yeah, and I definitely think that the science, what you're doing, the research, quantitative research, and being able to do it in a way that you're doing it, which I love and respect, is that you're not just trying to advocate for a position. You're saying this is a general direction we want to go, and the environment has become, well, like my generation, it was surviving. So you
Yeah.
just take in territory.
Right.
Well, now it's a wisdom time to say, okay, well, is this a good
Yeah.
way to take
Yeah.
territory?
Yeah. Is
And
this territory we want to take here?
yeah, or is it destructive? And I've had to ask that about many things I do in business, because
Yeah.
there was such a human cost that everybody worked too hard, what we related about,
Yeah.
and it's just, you help teach me, to be kind, be patient, just not
Yeah.
do the results, and so I believe that we can just start to advocate for, like the book that we both read or got sent from. I don't think it
Yeah.
was Wayne, but who was
Uh,
it? That's
uh,
Robert.
is it
Yeah,
Pratt?
Pratt,
Yeah.
and it was excellent, and it was really just profound on just rhetoric that I don't believe the past rhetoric. I think everybody's kind of sick of it, and I think that there's going to be those voices that come up, like the Barbara Boyers that I was telling you in Kansas, saying
Mm,
there'd be this attack ad, and then she would come back and say, let's quit attacking each other and let's quit.
yeah.
And she didn't even get into how much that was a misrepresentation to her. She just got
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
the virtue of it, which
I that's probably the thing I'm most excited for tomorrow, or I guess the day after, is that
yeah,
I'm ready for these commercials to be over. I
yeah,
mean, and it's funny because like I have a lot of political convictions about certain things, and I was like, I was so thrown off. There's a lot of times where um, the advertisements, even for the person who I ended up voting for here in Colorado, I like didn't want to vote. Like it was just it's
if
we
you just listen to the article or the commercial, you might say no to that person, or
no, it was the inverse of that. It was like
okay,
it flipped on, and so it was like an attack ad by the person who I ended up voting for against the other individual, and it just rang of like being hyperbolic and being and it, and a lot of times I flip it on mute as soon as I can and stuff like that. And
yeah,
so I legitimately got the names mixed up because I associated them with the same, like they became the same person in my head because it was all about these like ridiculous attack ads, and I was like, I just want to, like
yeah,
either like I want to be involved in politics, right? And so sometimes there's good advertisements, I guess, like you were saying, where it's just like, hey, can we just stop, and being like, this is what I advocate for, this is what I want to do, these is what the promises and that I want to make to this group of people, and here's how I'll fulfill them. Like all of them are great, but that's just not how it's been. And it certainly in 2016 and 2020, it just doesn't seem like it's, and it's both parties. No, it's not like one party is guilty of this. So
Yeah, no, I just, something was hitting me about, just being able to find the right voice. I thought I loved what you said earlier, just the myths that can happen about a people group, like the Germans being told the Jews,
yeah.
had sharp teeth or whatever it was, and
Well, yeah. So yeah. So in Nazi Germany, there was a lot of like propaganda about Jews and of that they were dirty and that they were demons and stuff like that. And so there was like there would be Germans who would meet Jews for the first time and be confused because they didn't have horns. Like, and it's like, and so a lot of times the best way of solving this hatred for the other, whatever that might be, is just meeting the other, and it's like the Ku Klux Klan white supremacist isn't probably gonna stop being a white supremacist until a black firefighter saves their family from a fire. Like that, you have to be able to see it and interact with it, and then once you do, you realize this person who I thought they were or thought they were about is nothing like who they were. And I know it too of, I being in both going from a conservative upbringing to a very liberal community, I see it like I see what I used to think about liberals, and then I'm with liberals and I'm like, oh, these people are not nearly as like evil and depraved as I thought they were. And then the same going back, I know that there's a lot of people who talk about conservatives, and I'm like, I think about the people that I grew up with, and I'm like, there were so many honest people, and there's a lot of people too. Like there's a particular person that you and I know well that I mentioned previously, and I won't net here, but like I disagree with a lot of his politics, and I think that he has some bad stuff that he says in his politics, but like I've probably met, I don't know, just in the way that he interacts with people on a day-to-day basis and just the human interaction away from politics and certain stuff. He's the kindest person you'll ever meet. Like if you were just to meet him in an airport or cross paths with him, I mean, you don't meet the kind of person him. And so that's where I think that the best way to like actually get away from these opinions of people and of ideologies and the left or the right or the conservatives is just to meet them and not that there isn't reason to be concerned, and there isn't, like, I don't want to say that there's not very serious political issues, but at the end of the day, people are people, and there's a lot of good in people, there's a lot of bad in people, and a lot of people are just trying to make sure that they're protected, that their family is protected, that the ones that they love are protected, that they can make meaning, have like a good, meaningful life. And that's just something we have to fight to remember, especially right now.
I think identifying those keys where there's assumed things, like you were saying, isolation politics, somebody in a rural position could have a certain disposition, not always, but I think that just us coming into agreement as we move forward, because I'm really praying that there's not a raging tomorrow and a hopelessness, but that there's because I've been close enough to political centers or people in the know that say there's always threats out there, and I think as much as we ever had the curtain pulled back on the political process, we've had it pulled back.
Yeah,
but it's still a dot, compare the goodness. And I think I said this earlier.
Yeah.
And I think that if we can really cite the issues and have, just a heartfelt discussion on how to go forward, I think there's going to need to be healing first.
Yeah.
And I think that means going to those that even felt like enemies in the sense that they were attacking or whatever, maybe, to just be able to identify with their pain to say, why, like you were telling me about the lesbian couple and the Amy Comey Barrett, and wondering, well, could I be outlawed? Where she's been pretty clear, I believe, on. I might feel this way personally, but I don't have an opinion on this. It's not, and or I might not even have a big opinion on it. It's just every person. I think when you get into a place where you understand, don't judge in the sense of we're not God, we don't have to hold that up. Righteousness in certain areas, and that things work out. And if I need to change, and there's been times I've needed to be changed, God's big enough that I run into my own problems enough to where, so I think that I look forward with excitement to addressing some of these things in a way that, I do like the idea of having the Blue Springs mayor on. He'd come, and, there's
Carson
4 or
Ross.
5, there's
That's his
retired
name.
mayor.
Carson Ross?
Carson Ross.
Yeah.
He wrote me back, and he'd have a discussion with us. And then the other mayor, Quentin, I've met. I don't know him as well. Yeah. But then, the senator from California that we know, Shannon. And
oh, yeah.
then, they're passionate, but if they are treated with respect and appreciation, then then you get to see why they feel the way they do. It might not be what you think is the best conclusion. That there's more information to consider, but I think that's worth Karen Go, the mayor of Bakersfield. She's been willing to just talk about these issues. I feel excited about it because seeing a better world and more radiant cities. I mean, we don't want apocalyptic devastation. We don't want people to get so upset that they're destroying cities and they're destroying each other, And that's where
kidnapping governors.
That's where wisdom and where can people are looking for that. I'm gonna give. I was gonna do it tonight, but I was gonna give, just the present tense approach I'm going to have for tomorrow. I'm going to set tomorrow apart where I'm going to tell everybody about the Australia event because, I dreamed about it where I went in and I read that verse, can a nation be saved in a day? They had the Qantas crisis and it was going to shut down their economy.
Yeah.
And they invited me in to their parliament to pray like a chaplain, but to give them any wisdom. And I wasn't doing that good. My adrenals were tired. So the short of it is I said, well, let's, because they were arguing. And Bob was the owner of Qantas. He was the, the big shareholder. And he was just, and that was somewhere where the minimum wage was going to put him out of business. Or it wasn't that, it was the social labor laws where they could work for 2 years. So anyhow, the point was it was tough for him, and you can really tell him. It's just asking for some relief. But he shut the whole thing down today. But I just said, can we remember some of the good and the history? And I asked this 82-year-old senator, I said, you helped bring the oil. Well, I didn't know his grandfather. It's like big courage, wisdom to get oil from Perth to Sydney, 800 miles. And so he got up and he just reminisced on the history and the good, not sugarcoating things, and then just said, we can make it through this time. And, he just spoke promises with hope. And it was like there was this composure without increasing fear or opposition. And it wasn't people letting down on their ideals, but there were solutions that came forth versus the opposition. And a lot of people feel like if they let down on some of the issues, that they're gonna be steamrolled. Versus, no, you can maintain your composure. That's the Bible. It says if you get alarmed by your opponent, you've lost. It says don't maintain your composure, and it says make friends with your enemies. Be slow to speak, quick to listen. And the point is that there's log in your eye a lot of times. But the short of it is that they had a discussion, and then he prayed, and I said, your planes will be up in a few days. And that was supposed to be 6 months, and the planes were up in a few days. Not like I did anything, but I could just tell they came to agreement.
Yeah.
So I've asked Francis because he's a Supreme Court justice there, but my approach is going to be proclaiming the promises. And I think we agree on a lot of the freedoms and the promises. It's a methodology sometimes.
Right.
And that's where I think, just being able to talk and look at that and be able to not necessarily come to a full agreement, but just understand our hearts a little better on each side, and we'll be representatives of that. And then go out and ask for solutions that are good, and then us making $1 million off of our solutions.
Totally. I mean, sure.
Wealth creation, man.
That's what I'm going for.
And sons and Eastern and Hebrew times took care of their dads, and I just
good thing it ain't those times. Good thing it ain't those times, because their daughters wouldn't have as much, but you got some daughters who are doing quite well in that world. They're conquering,
hitting home runs. I got a way to figure it out how to get to their bank accounts and their hearts.
Well, that's horrible.
But at the same time, I see you holding me when I'm drooling, and I can't control myself.
So basically, just normal, growing up.
That's perfect, man. All right, I've run out of gas, but we're friends.
Yeah, sounds good.
Agreement. We're friends and better friends through this process.
Friends. Yeah, political election. That can't come in between us.
That's right. And friends and just with the Chiefs versus the Broncos, you're not ever going to become a Broncos fan.
Oh, I'd never do that to you. I'd never do that to me. No, yeah. Huge, okay. Yeah. It is a little. It's sometimes sad though. I've been kind of rooting for the Broncos when they're not playing the Chiefs, just because I'm not worried about them ever beating the Chiefs or anything like that. And lately they've done good, but oh man, it's nice to have Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, they won yesterday, right?
They won. Yeah, it was a crazy win, and it was against the Chargers, so it was win-win.
And Drew Lock, who
he played for Missouri. Yeah.
MU guy. I was excited to see him do well, So,
yeah, for sure.
I love you, buddy.
Love you too, Dad.
Okay, so we'll check in after the election to just give our responses.
I guess, yeah. Sounds good.
We'll be better on those commentators on TV. So, All right.
Love you.
Good talk. Love you, man. And I just think this spoke peace to all and composure. So, thank you. All right. Good night, man.
Good night.
See.